wherever you're listening or watching Radio Afinju. The time is 6 p.m.
Ẹ bá mi pè o. Àfínjú. Kí lorúkọ rẹ̀? Àfínjú. Rédíò. Àfínjú. Gbogbo èèyàn ló ń gbọ́ Àfínjú. Gbogbo èèyàn ló ń gbọ́ Àfínjú. Lórí WhatsApp. Àfínjú. Instagram. Àfínjú. Facebook. Àfínjú. Lórí X. Àfínjú. Lórí YouTube. Àfínjú. Lórí TikTok. Àfínjú. Kí lorúkọ rẹ̀? Àfínjú. Ẹ bá mi pè o. Àfínjú. Rédíò. Àfínjú. Gbogbo èèyàn ló ń gbọ́ 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 Àfínjú. Rédíò Àfínjú. Rédíò Àfínjú. Rédíò Àfínjú.
This is the world news on Radio Afinju.
First, a look at the highlights. President Tinubu launches state projects in Nasarawa. Kenyans stage anti-government protest 1 year after storming parliament. Higher spending, top priority as leaders gather in Hague for NATO summit. Good evening and welcome to the World News on Radio Afinju. My name is Pearl Durotoye. The news in detail. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu launched several legacy projects executed by Governor Abdullahi Sulei's administration in Lafia, Nasarawa state capital. Tinubu commissioned the 16 billion naira Lafia flyover underpass, a signature infrastructure project aimed at easing traffic flow in the state capital, a fleet of agricultural tractors, the Shandam Dual Carriageway, and the ultra-modern state secretariat complex located along Shandam Road. In the company of the state governor and some key government officials, as well as many party stakeholders, President Tinubu commissioned these projects, all parts of Governor Sulei's developmental strides. Soon after the commissioning, President Tinubu paid a courtesy visit to the Emir of Lafia, Sidi Bage, at his palace. The event climaxed with a town hall meeting with stakeholders at the Aliyu Akwe Doma Banquet Hall, Government House, also situated on Shendem Road. The 2025 budget of Rivers State, totaling 1.485 trillion naira, has been passed following the third reading of the appropriation bill on the Senate floor today. This came after the upper chamber considered the report of the ad hoc committee on Rivers State during the Committee of Supply session. The bill seeks to authorize the issuance of 1.485 trillion naira from the Consolidated Revenue Fund of Rivers State for the fiscal year ending December 31st, 2025. The approved budget breakdown includes 120.8 billion naira for debt servicing, 281.38 billion naira for recurrent non-debt expenditure, and 1.077 trillion naira for capital expenditure. The Rivers State 2025 budget will now proceed for assent and implementation. A needs assessment of the victims of the June 13th Yelwata attack by bandits for effective and efficient interventions has commenced. The Minister of Humanitarian Affairs and Poverty Reduction, Nentawe Yelwata, who dropped this hint in Makurdi, Benue State capital, after a closed-door meeting with stakeholders and security heads, added that the federal government needed comprehensive assessment data of the victims and their community. Yelwata also stated that the assessment would include both the humanitarian and development components for the victims of attacks in the state, especially the people of Yelwata. The minister announced that he was in the state on the directives of President Bola Tinubu, noting that those carrying out the exercise needed security protection, hence the need to meet with security heads and stakeholders. 110 letters of intent have been confirmed received from associations seeking registration as political parties. The Independent National Electoral Commission, confirming this, said the commission has also released the full list of the 110 associations detailing their proposed names, acronyms, addresses, as well as the names of their chairmen and secretaries. INEC Chairman Mahmood Yakubu noted that the requests are being processed in line with the relevant laws and Commission's regulations and guidelines. Yakubu urged Nigerians, especially those interested in registering political parties, to consult the Commission's regulations and guidelines for political parties 2022, available on Commission's website. Away from Nigeria, at least 10 people were hospitalized with gunshot injuries during rallies in Kenya to mark the one-year anniversary of protests against a tax bill that turned deadly. According to a hospital source and reporters, it was not immediately clear who had shot them. Thousands of Kenyans took to the streets earlier in the day to commemorate demonstrations last year that left at least 60 people dead and culminated in the storming of the National Parliament. Reports said police fired tear gas and water cannon to disperse protesters in the capital Nairobi and blocked incoming traffic towards the Central Business District, the epicenter of the protests. Although last year's protest faded after President William Ruto withdrew proposed tax hikes, public anger over the use of excessive force by security agencies has not abated, with fresh demonstrations this month over the death of a blogger in police custody. In other parts of Africa, a South African judge halted the burial of former Zambian President Edgar Lungu while the funeral service was underway in an escalation of a standoff between his family and the government. Lungu, who died on June 5th while seeking medical care in South Africa, was a rival of President Hakainde Hichilema, who wanted to lead a state funeral for his predecessor in Zambia. Lungu's family opposed the plans and blocked his body from being repatriated, saying he would not have wanted Hichilema at his funeral. Zambia, in turn, filed a lawsuit seeking to stop the burial in South Africa. In a ruling delivered as Lungu's widow and other mourners were already gathered in the church, a Gauteng Region High Court judge said that after an agreement between the parties, respondents undertake not to proceed with the funeral or burial of the late president. It said the case will be heard on August 4th. In Asia, a South Korean court has rejected a request to issue an arrest warrant for former President Yoon Suk-yeol related to a probe into his short-lived attempt to impose martial law. South Korea's special prosecutor had asked the court to issue an arrest warrant for Yoon as an investigation intensified over the ousted leader's botched bid to declare martial law in December. Yoon, who is already facing a criminal trial on insurrection charges for issuing the martial law declaration, was arrested in January after resisting authorities trying to take him into custody, but was released after 52 days on technical grounds. A senior member of the Special Prosecutor's team of investigators said the new warrant was on a charge of obstruction. In Europe, NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte has said there is no alternative to the 32 member states spending more on defense, given the threat from Russia and the broader international security situation. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz has described the meeting as historic as the leaders of the Western Defensive Alliance gathered in The Hague, where they are set to commit to spending 5% of national output on defense and related infrastructure. It is U.S. President Donald Trump's first NATO summit since 2019, and as he traveled, he appeared to raise questions about the alliance's mutual defense guarantee, under which an attack on one member is seen as an attack on all. Western leaders have all had to navigate their relationships with Trump, known for his sometimes unpredictable handling of diplomacy. The two-day NATO summit has already been scaled back, apparently to accommodate his schedule. Armenian authorities have arrested a prominent Christian cleric, Archbishop Bagrat Galstanyan, and accused him of orchestrating a plot to overthrow the government. Armenia's investigative committee, in a statement, said Galstanyan and alleged co-conspirators had acquired the means and tools necessary to commit a terrorist attack and seize power. Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan wrote on his Telegram channel that the authorities thwarted a large and sinister plan by the criminal oligarchic clergy to take power in Armenia. It was the second arrest this month of a prominent government opponent after Russian-Armenian real estate billionaire Samvel Karapetyan was detained on accusations of making public calls to usurp power. Lawyers for Karapetyan said the businessman denies wrongdoing. Pashinyan rose to power on a wave of street protests in 2018, but came under heavy domestic pressure after major losses to Azerbaijan in a brief war in 2020. In 2023, Azerbaijan retook the whole of the mountain enclave of Nagorno-Karabakh, where ethnic Armenians had enjoyed de facto independence for decades. In the Americas, Abrego Garcia, the migrant wrongly deported to El Salvador by President Donald Trump's administration, only to be returned to the United States to face criminal charges, is due back in court for a judge in Tennessee to set the conditions of his release from jail. Nashville-based U.S. Magistrate Judge Barbara Holmes had ruled that the administration could not continue to detain Abrego, 29 years old, pending trial on 2 charges accusing him of conspiring with at least 5 other members of a smuggling ring to bring migrants into the United States illegally. Abrego, a Salvadoran national who had been living in Maryland, has pleaded not guilty, but his case has become emblematic of the Republican president's aggressive immigration crackdown and the pushback from rights groups. His lawyers have called the charges an effort by the administration to justify its violation of Abrego's rights by deporting him to El Salvador, despite a 2019 judicial order barring such a move on the grounds that he could face persecution by gangs in his home country. In the Middle East, Israel's defense minister today designated Iran's central bank a terror organization, saying the move was aimed at halting financing for Iran-backed militant groups the day after a ceasefire between the two foes took hold. Iran and Israel agreed a ceasefire on Tuesday, ending 12 days of tit-for-tat strikes between the longtime foes. The two sides have been locked in a shadow war for decades, with Israel battling several Iran-backed groups in the region, including Hamas in the Gaza Strip since October 2023. Israel had said its bombing campaign, which began on June 13th, was aimed at preventing Iran from acquiring a nuclear weapon, an ambition Tehran has consistently denied. Now talking sports, the federal government has finally fulfilled its 3-decade-old promise of house allocations to members of the 1994 Super Eagles squad that won the Africa Cup of Nations in Tunisia. According to a statement posted on the ministry's website, one of the beneficiaries, former striker Efane Koku, represented at the brief ceremony by his niece Lisa Nwagbogun, was presented with an allocation letter for a house in Abuja. The director and head of Department, Public Building and Housing Development, Bemi Temitope, presented the letter on behalf of the Minister of Housing and Urban Development. Temitope described the move as part of the government's commitment to rewarding the patriotic service of the team, which brought honor to the nation 3 decades ago. It will be recalled that former President Muhammadu Buhari approved the implementation of the 1999 Housing Pledge in 2022, 28 years after it was first made. Still talking sports, former England midfielder Adam Lallana has retired from playing at the age of 37. Lallana, who won 34 caps for his country, returned to Southampton last season after making his name in his first spell there. He only made 5 starts as Saints were relegated to the Championship, but also worked as a coach, a role he will continue at St Mary's under new boss Will Steele. Lallana, who joined Liverpool from Saints for £25 million in 2014, went on to win the Premier League and Champions League and came through Southampton's academy before making his debut for the first team as an 18-year-old in 2006. He featured almost 300 times for Saints across the 2 spells and was part of the squad that won back-to-back promotions from League One to the Premier League. Lallana was captain when he left for Anfield during the summer, where he also played for England at the 2014 World Cup. Before we go, here again are the highlights. President Bola Tinubu inaugurated several legacy projects executed by Governor Abdullahi Sulei's administration in Lafia, Nasarawa state capital. That includes the 16 billion naira Lafia flyover underpass, a signature infrastructure project aimed at easing traffic flow in the state capital, a fleet of agricultural tractors, the Shendam dual carriageway, and the ultra-modern state secretariat complex located along Shendam Road. Elsewhere, at least 10 people were hospitalized with gunshot injuries during rallies in Kenya to mark the 1-year anniversary of protests against a tax bill that turned deadly. And in Europe, NATO's Secretary General Mark Rutte has said there is no alternative to the 32 member states spending more on defense, given the threat from Russia and the broader international security situation. That was the world news on Radio Afinju. To view our channel, please follow Radio Afinju on Facebook, X and YouTube. The news was edited by Stella Durotoye. My name is Durotoye. Thanks for listening. Good evening.